The complexities of human relationships are often baffling, and few dynamics are as confusing as the seeming paradox of love and emotional withdrawal. Why would someone who professes to care for you pull away? Why does the man who claims to love you sometimes seem distant, unresponsive, or even cold? It's tempting to jump to conclusions, to assume neglect or lack of affection, but the reality is far more nuanced and deeply psychological. Relationships are not simply about proximity or attention. They are about the intricate dance of human needs, fears, and vulnerabilities. The truth is, love isn't always expressed in the ways we expect. At times, love compels a person to withdraw, not because they care less, but because they care so deeply that their own insecurities come to the surface. When a man loves a woman, he may be confronted with profound questions about his worthiness, his ability to meet her expectations, and the overwhelming responsibility that love demands. This withdrawal is not rejection, it's reflection. It's an internal struggle with his sense of self and what he believes he must become to deserve the connection he values so deeply. This is the loop that so many fail to recognize. Love and fear are intertwined. The greater the love, the greater the stakes, and with higher stakes comes the potential for failure, disappointment, or loss. So, the very act of pulling away might not signify indifference, but an inner reckoning, a grappling with the weight of their emotions. When we talk about vulnerability, we're discussing one of the most profound challenges of human existence. Vulnerability is the willingness to reveal who you are at your core, to expose your fears, your inadequacies, your insecurities, and to do so in the presence of another. It's not a trivial thing. It's not just about sharing your feelings or being honest. It's about taking the risk that the person you reveal yourself to might see you and reject you. That's the gamble, and it's a terrifying one. For men, this fear is often magnified by societal expectations. From an early age, many men are conditioned to be stoic, to be strong, to suppress any indication of weakness. Vulnerability in this context becomes synonymous with failure. It becomes the opposite of the strength they've been taught to value. When a man finds himself in a position where love demands vulnerability, he can experience a kind of existential crisis. He is torn between the desire for connection and the fear that being truly seen will lead to rejection. This is why love can provoke withdrawal. It's not that he doesn't feel deeply, it's that he feels so deeply that it shakes the very foundations of his identity. The love he has for you challenges the walls he's built to protect himself. Those walls have served him well in the past. They've kept him safe from pain, from betrayal, from loss. But now, those same walls become barriers to the intimacy he craves. He doesn't know how to let them down without risking everything. When a man loves you, his withdrawal can often be a sign that he's grappling with these internal conflicts. He's asking himself, can I trust her with this part of me? What if she doesn't like what she sees? What if I let her in and she leaves anyway? These aren't conscious questions most of the time, but they're there, simmering beneath the surface. Love brings them to the forefront, forcing him to confront fears he may not even realize he has. But this isn't just about fear, it's also about control. Vulnerability requires a relinquishment of control. And for someone who has spent a lifetime guarding against hurt, that can feel like an insurmountable challenge. When he distances himself, he's trying to regain a sense of control. He's pulling back, not because he doesn't care, but because caring so much has left him feeling exposed and uncertain. The paradox here is profound. The very thing he wants, connection, closeness, love, is the thing that terrifies him the most. And this is where relationships become a crucible, a place where two people's vulnerabilities collide. For the man who withdraws, the question becomes whether he can overcome the fear that holds him back. Can he take the risk? Can he trust that revealing his true self won't lead to his undoing. This isn't an easy process. It's not something that happens overnight. A man who withdraws out of fear of vulnerability isn't doing so maliciously. He's protecting himself in the only way he knows how. But protection can become a prison, and that's the tragedy of it. By avoiding vulnerability, he also avoids the deeper connection he longs for. To navigate this, he has to learn that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. It takes immense courage to say, "This is who I am, flaws and all," and to let someone else decide whether they accept you. That's the risk love demands, and it's not just men who face this challenge, it's universal. But for men, the societal pressure to appear invulnerable adds another layer of difficulty. When he loves you and withdraws, it's often because he's wrestling with these pressures. He's trying to reconcile the person he's been told he should be with the person he wants to be. He's learning, perhaps for the first time, that love requires something of him that no amount of strength or control can provide. It requires openness, and openness requires trust, not just in you, but in himself. Understanding love as an invitation to grow rather than a mere feeling of comfort or joy is a profound shift in perspective. It forces us to confront the reality that love is not about passivity or simple enjoyment. It's about transformation. And transformation, by its very nature, is uncomfortable, unsettling, and often painful. Yet it's within this discomfort that the opportunity for true growth resides. For a man who loves deeply, this transformation is both a challenge and a necessity. Love demands that he confront the parts of himself that have been neglected, ignored, or suppressed. It doesn't allow him to stay stagnant or to rest in the safety of his old patterns. Instead, it asks him to rise to a higher standard, to become the kind of person who can sustain and nurture the relationship he desires. This is not an easy process, and it's one of the reasons why love can feel so overwhelming, even frightening. When a man appears to withdraw, it's often because he's grappling with this challenge. He's not running from love itself, but from what love demands of him. He's realizing that to truly be with you, he must let go of the parts of himself that are holding him back, the fears, the insecurities, the selfish tendencies that no longer serve him. This realization can be deeply unsettling because it forces him to confront the gap between who he is and who he wants to become. This process of growth is not something that can be rushed or forced. It's a journey that requires patience, both from the man undergoing it and from the person who loves him. He has to face the reality that love is not about finding someone who will accept him as he is without question. It's about finding someone who inspires him to become better, not through criticism or coercion, but through the simple act of being themselves. When a man loves you, your presence alone can serve as a mirror, reflecting back to him both his strengths and his shortcomings. This is not always a comfortable experience. To see oneself clearly is a rare and difficult thing, especially when it reveals aspects of your character that you'd rather not acknowledge. But it's also an invaluable gift because it offers the opportunity for growth and self-improvement. In this sense, love is a catalyst. It ignites within him the desire to rise above his limitations, to become someone who is worthy of the connection he cherishes. This is not about perfection. It's about effort and intention. It's about recognizing that love is not a passive state, but an active choice, a commitment to continually strive for better, both individually and as a couple. This process of growth is deeply personal, and it's one that each man must undertake in his own way and at his own pace. It's not something that can be dictated or demanded. The role of love in this journey is not to push or pull, but to provide a foundation of support and understanding. It's about creating an environment in which growth feels possible, even when it feels difficult. Love also teaches him the importance of vulnerability in this journey. Growth cannot occur in isolation. It requires connection and openness. To grow, he must be willing to share his fears, his struggles, and his failures. This is where love becomes both a challenge and a source of strength. It challenges him to step outside his comfort zone, to let go of his pride, and to embrace the uncertainty of being truly seen. But it also provides him with the safety and security he needs to take those steps. Ultimately, the growth that love demands is not just about becoming a better partner, it's about becoming a better person. It's about aligning his actions with his values, developing his character, and finding purpose beyond his own immediate desires. This is what makes love so transformative. It pushes him to evolve, not because he feels obligated to do so, but because he genuinely wants to. When we consider the concept of emotional distance in relationships, particularly when it appears in the context of love, it's tempting to interpret it as a rejection or a lack of interest. But often, this distance is something far more intricate, a complex interplay of self-preservation, fear, and a deeply rooted need to process and navigate intense emotions. For a man who loves you, this withdrawal is not an abandonment of the relationship. It's a reflection of his internal struggle as he tries to reconcile the depth of his feelings with his own sense of identity. Love, for many men, is not simply a state of being, it's a confrontation with vulnerability, an emotional exposure that can feel threatening to the very core of their autonomy. From a young age, many men are conditioned to view vulnerability as a weakness, something to be avoided or hidden. Yet love demands vulnerability. It insists on it. To truly connect with someone, to build a relationship of depth and meaning, requires an openness that can feel profoundly uncomfortable. And so when a man pulls away, it may be less about you and more about his struggle with this vulnerability. This distance serves as a coping mechanism, a way for him to create the emotional space needed to process the intensity of what he's feeling. It's as if his mind is saying, I need to step back and figure out what this means and how to handle it. It's not an indication of a lack of love, but a sign that he's grappling with its weight. This is an important distinction because it shifts the narrative from one of rejection to one of personal growth. It highlights the internal work he is doing to align his actions with his emotions. But this process is not without its challenges. The societal expectations placed on men often compound this struggle. They're taught to be strong, stoic, and self-reliant, to solve problems on their own without seeking help or showing weakness. These expectations create a barrier to emotional expression, making it difficult for many men to articulate what they're feeling or why they need space. The result is a kind of emotional withdrawal that can be easily misunderstood. This withdrawal is not a sign of disinterest or apathy. It's a way of navigating the overwhelming nature of love. It's a way of preserving a sense of control in a situation that feels profoundly uncontrollable. And while this may seem counterintuitive, it's often through this distance that a man begins to understand the depth of his feelings. It's in the quiet moments of reflection, away from the intensity of the relationship, that he can start to make sense of what love means to him and what it asks of him. For the woman on the receiving end of this distance, the experience can be painful and confusing. It's natural to question his feelings or to wonder if you've done something wrong. But it's important to recognize that his withdrawal is not about you, it's about him. It's about his journey to understand himself and his capacity for love. This understanding requires patience and empathy. It requires a willingness to see his actions not as a rejection, but as a part of his process. This distance can also serve as a reminder of the importance of individuality within a relationship. Love does not mean losing oneself in another person. It means building a connection that enhances both individuals. By creating space for his own growth, he's also creating space for the relationship to grow. This is a delicate balance, one that requires both partners to trust in the process. and to believe in the strength of their connection. At its core, this emotional distance is a testament to the transformative power of love. It's a reflection of the ways in which love pushes us to confront our fears, to challenge our assumptions, and to grow in ways we never thought possible. It's a reminder that love is not always easy or straightforward, but it is always worth the effort. For the man who loves you, this distance is not a sign of his absence, but a step toward becoming the person he wants to be for you. When we examine the dynamics of emotional withdrawal in a relationship, especially when it's cloaked in love, there is a profound opportunity for growth that often goes unnoticed. It may feel counterintuitive, but a man's temporary withdrawal, rather than being a signal of disinterest or coldness, can be an indication of a more profound emotional engagement. This engagement, however, requires space for recalibration, a space to reflect, and a space to process. The challenge is not in the withdrawal itself, but in how it is interpreted and managed within the relationship. At its core, emotional withdrawal is not about escape, but transformation. When a man feels deeply, he encounters a threshold of vulnerability that challenges his core understanding of self and relationship. Love, especially the kind that demands commitment and openness, is inherently transformative. It pulls apart old structures and forces an individual to confront what they value, what they fear, and what they are willing to sacrifice. For a man, this process can be particularly disorienting. Society often fails to equip men with the tools to process emotions constructively, leaving them to navigate this terrain with uncertainty and caution. This uncertainty leads to the necessity of withdrawal. In stepping back, a man is not retreating from the relationship, rather, he is stepping into himself. He is attempting to integrate the intense emotional experiences he's encountering, making sense of them in a way that feels authentic and aligned with his sense of purpose. Love does not merely ask for affection. It demands alignment. It demands that he reconcile his emotions with his actions and intentions, and this reconciliation takes time and introspection. In this sense, withdrawal becomes a mirror, a reflection of his struggle to adapt to the profound changes love introduces into his life. It is not an absence, but a presence in its own right, a process of becoming rather than a denial of connection. And here lies the paradox. The space created by withdrawal is not a void, but an invitation. It's an invitation for growth, for self-exploration, and for the strengthening of the relationship. By stepping back, he is not breaking away, but preparing to step forward in a more meaningful and deliberate way. This process of withdrawal also highlights the importance of trust within a relationship. Trust is not merely about believing in the fidelity of one's partner. It is about trusting in their journey, in their capacity to navigate their own emotions and come out stronger. It requires a faith in the resilience of the bond you share, a belief that love can withstand the ebbs and flows of emotional tides. This trust is not blind, but grounded in understanding and empathy, in the recognition that love is as much about supporting growth as it is about sharing joy. For the partner experiencing the withdrawal, the challenge is to resist the urge to fill the space with fear or doubt. It's natural to feel unsettled by emotional distance, but it's crucial to recognize it as a part of the process rather than a threat to the relationship. This recognition requires a shift in perspective, from seeing withdrawal as an act of detachment to seeing it as an act of engagement, a necessary step in the deeper alignment of emotions and intention. Moreover, this process underscores the reciprocal nature of relationships. While a man navigates his emotional transformation, his partner is given the opportunity to reflect on her own growth and independence. Relationships are not about two halves making a whole. They are about two wholes coming together to create something greater. The space created by withdrawal can be a gift, offering both partners the chance to explore their individuality and bring even more depth to their connection. In this way, emotional withdrawal becomes a crucible for transformation, not just for the individual experiencing it, but for the relationship as a whole. It forces both partners to confront the complexities of love, to navigate the uncomfortable spaces, and to emerge stronger and more aligned. This process is not easy, nor is it without pain. But it is in these moments of struggle that the deepest growth occurs, both individually and collectively. Ultimately, love is not about perfection, it's about persistence. It's about navigating the challenges and uncertainties with a commitment to growth and connection. Emotional withdrawal, far from being a sign of failure, is a step in this journey, a step toward a deeper understanding of oneself, one's partner, and the bond they share. It is a reminder that love, in all its complexity, is a transformative force, one that challenges and enriches in equal measure. The truth is, love is rarely linear. It's a complicated mix of emotions, intentions, and vulnerabilities. When he ignores you, it's easy to feel unloved or unimportant, but often his withdrawal is a sign of the depth of his feelings rather than the lack of them. By recognizing the patterns behind his behavior, you can begin to bridge the gap between misunderstanding and connection.